Today we'll talk about the recent warning from APTA, the Travel Association, which found that a quarter of all holidaymakers and a startling 41% of young adults are travelling abroad without insurance. Well, APTA has outlined the risks. We'll get perspective from an insurance expert on the true severity of what's at stake. We're moving beyond lost luggage to the potential for life-altering financial crises stemming from medical emergencies, disability and significant gaps in people's existing cover, like the fact that many South African life policies don't pay out for debts abroad. Joining us is Langa Sigodi, an account executive at Maksure Risk Solutions. Langa, thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the APTA study shows a clear disconnect between risk and reality. Yeah. From your professional standpoint, what do you think so many people, young travellers in particular, are willing to gamble with such potentially devastating consequences?
I mean, it's a great question, and I think it's a question that the insurance industry has been grappling with for pretty much since its existence. I think you'll tend to find throughout history that the lowest buyers of insurance tend to be young people. Perhaps, I don't know if I can call myself a young person still, but there's an air of invincibility that we feel. There's certain events that we just don't think are going to happen to us, so there's that disconnect. I'm sure there's some great psychologists out there who could write some good pieces on that. But, the reality is that these consequences often have catastrophic consequences for the people that we leave behind. When we're talking about the worst case scenarios, such as death environments, is that, we're not here to pick up the pieces, as it were, financially and otherwise, when these events happen.
Well, one of the reasons that we've asked you to come on the show is because there have been a number of issues. One as recent as a few weeks ago, where a young South African who was studying in China passed away, right? And the parents have now had to go through various processes of fundraising, GoFundMe, et cetera, to try and repatriate that body, which is running into several hundred thousands of rand. How can this be averted?
And I think, besides the recent case, we've seen a number of these cases and similar type events. There was a lady, 2022, I think from Gqeberha, who passed away in China. We've had people in the United States and Canada and the UK in last year and the year before. I think, it starts off with education. I think besides the air of feeling invincible, perhaps, that we might feel as young people, we also need to think about how do we let people know what is out there from a product perspective for insurance, and specifically detailing this issue of repatriation. Again, I just can't emphasize enough that the consequences for the people that we leave behind are so devastating. And so I think that's where we need to start. Conversations such as this, Hugo, I think are really, really good, where we highlight what is out there from a product solution perspective, and also to help people to let them know that, buy the insurance and pay the premium. Oftentimes, for example, people will be moving overseas on a fixed-term contract. They may be required to produce some form of insurance on entry to the country, and then stop paying the premiums. So that's another thing that we need to instill as a culture amongst the young South Africans, in particular, that we're talking about today.
Well, insurance companies are notorious for the fine print.
Yeah,
that's about 3,000 pages, and we don't like to read. So, when looking at these policies or purchasing policies, what are some of the key things that one needs to look out for?
Again, highlighting what we're talking about today, I think it's incumbent, firstly, on the insurance companies themselves. Treating customers fairly, otherwise known as TCF, has been a philosophy and legislation that has come into the country exactly for this reason that you're talking about. Is it fair that we have 3,000 words, 3,000 pages of jargon, that's difficult to comprehend, large to read, large in volume, I should say. And so we should be saying there's a couple of things that we should do from a legislative perspective. One, make the policies easier to read. And two, I think there should be, when it comes, again, to repatriation specifically, a clause that says this is included or is not included, and how much it is. I think it should be, there's certain steps that we should take to highlight those certain clauses within the policies. And I think at the end of the day, medical expenses is another thing. Looking at exchange rates issues, and just the cost of medical fees when you're overseas, particularly in Europe and the United States, your medical bill could run up into the millions rands very, very, very quickly. So we need to make sure that people know what they're buying. I try to choose my words carefully, but sometimes we may be under the impression that we have some sort of cover, some sort of insurance. There's these sorts of add-ons to products such as credit cards, for example,
yes.
That are not perhaps as comprehensive. And I think but we do need to make sure that the insurance companies themselves take responsibility for the products that they produce and what they inform their clients of.
Well, I like the issue that you raise around invincibility and the thinking or the assumption that young people like yourself are bulletproof. Now, many of these young people are individuals that are going to sports events. So, for instance, next year's World Cup, where South Africa is participating, first match out in Mexico, and also the possibility of being sued and liable for any accidents or events that could occur. What's available on the market to protect people from such?
Yeah, okay. So I think what we've largely been talking about up until now is sort of we've been talking about people who are going to be overseas for longer periods of time. The cases that we've discussed typically are young people teaching abroad, for example, or on fixed-term contracts for a year or two. But even when you're going on holiday, and that could be from a stint of a couple of days to a couple of weeks, like you said, Bafana will obviously be at the World Cup final in the United States, so we're going to be there for 7 weeks next year. And I think it's called it's simply called travel insurance products. There are a number of companies, insurance companies, both global and local, that offer this product. It's very, very important. So some countries, again, for entry for your visa requirement, will mandate you to have it. Others not. But again, I think the consciousness and the education to our population should be that take this out. The consequences are catastrophic when they do happen, and and it's largely quite affordable because of the scale and the volumes that we have. And I think it's also something worth thinking about is that these insurance companies often have large networks across a number of countries around the world, so you can get assistance even if you've been robbed, like you said, lost your luggage, for example. It doesn't have to be the most severe event that has happened, and you can get support for that. So I think they generally call travel insurance policies leisure travel or corporate travel. But yeah, that's where you should start looking, and there are a number of insurance companies in the country that do it.
And Langa, before we let you go very quickly, we were talking a little bit earlier about Durban beaches and how they're already starting to be flooded. Holidaymakers are flocking some of the beaches and various holiday destinations across the country. What should people be looking to do in order to protect their assets, particularly at home when they travel?
Look, I think you start off with your stock standard short-term insurance policy, making sure that your house is covered, your assets, whether that's a car or cell phones, etc. We know that during the holiday period, we do have things such as burglaries, but particularly, guys, be careful on the roads. We know that the number of road fatalities that we have over this period of time is very extensive. So be safe, make sure that you're taking your breaks, and the messages that we hear from government around this time and other peak holiday periods, be risk averse, I think, when it comes to this particular period in time.
Langa, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Hugo, I really appreciate it. Thank you, man.
Langa Sigodi, account executive at Maksure Risk Solutions, walking us through some of the dangers of not taking out insurance, whether you travel locally or abroad.